want to say welcome to everybody that's joining us online and a happy first fruits to you. And I guess technically it is a Shabbat Shalom because today is a high Sabbath. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I hope everybody had a good rest day yesterday. We did. Felt weird, again, not being here. But as PM said, for our cleanup next week, again, weather permitting, we certainly would love to have as many people come out. The more hands, the quicker it goes. But we do this every couple of years, and we definitely need it this year. So if you can do that, we would certainly appreciate it. Again, hello to everybody that's joining us online. Thank you so much for being part of LMC, wherever you are. Our prayers are with you. This morning, our opening verse is going to come from the Gospel according to John, chapter 6, verses 26 through 27, and verses 32 through 33, and 35. So I broke up the reading just a little bit, but it'll all hopefully make sense and flow. If you want, certainly you can read the entire narrative for yourself. The notes are out there if anybody wants them. Of course, same online, guys. You know the drill. John chapter 6, these are the Master's words. And Yeshua answered them and said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me not because you saw signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were satisfied. Do not labor for the food that is perishing, but for the food that is remaining to everlasting life, which the Son of Adam shall give you. For the Father, Elohim, has said to them, truly, truly, I say to you," Yeshua says, "truly, truly, his seal is set upon him." Verse 32. Therefore, am I reading this right? Therefore Moses did not give you the bread of heaven. My apologies, guys. Therefore, Moses did not give you the bread out of heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of Elohim is he who comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. So that they said to him, "Master, give us this bread always." And he says, "I am the bread of life. He who eats this bread shall never go hungry, and he who believes in me shall not be thirsty at all." This morning, for a few moments, the title and the topic of the message is Bread from Heaven. Bread from heaven. You guys know the prayer here. If you pray with me, everybody at home. Father, give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart that is willing to obey. In the Master's name, amen. Amen. I'm sorry about the notes there. I don't know how that all got mixed up. I guess I don't know what it is. But those are the verses. This is a portion of the story in the Gospel according to John, right after the Master feeds the masses with the bread and the fish. And then this conversation ensues. And it's much longer than the verses that I just gave. Hopefully you guys have read it before. But it's really, really important because throughout the conversation in this part of the text, he is absolutely making a one-to-one comparison with the manna that fell in the wilderness and himself. And he's basically telling them that manna that you ate, that our forefathers ate in the wilderness, was actually me, and that he actually is the very bread of life. I know that you guys know this. If you've read your Bibles for any length of time, you've come across this before. But I want to expand on this a little bit because really what he's referring to, because if you're talking about the manna falling, when does the manna begin to fall? Well, it begins to fall at what you and I would now call today the counting of the Omer, or that's at least the memorial of it. Our counting of the Omer today becomes a memorial of when the manna falls. Now, here is the actual text out of the book of Leviticus. We just read some of this before as we did our wave offering of the barley. the barley sheaf. But here's Leviticus 23. I want to sort of establish a timeline here. So Leviticus chapter 23, verse 6. This is Moses, Elohim giving to Moses the order of feast days, how the feast days are going to occur in the house of Israel while they're there in the wilderness. Well, actually, when they go into the land, all the things that they're going to do. And there is an order to these days. Now, we're picking this up at the time of unleavened bread because we just finished unleavened bread, so this is all fresh in our mind. In fact, we still have our Passover banners up. We've got the red cloth behind us. Leviticus 23, verse 6, it says, "And on the 15th day of the new moon," meaning the month, "is the festival of matzot." So there's Passover, and then there's matzah, or unleavened bread. "Of matzot to Yahuwah, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread." In all actuality, we actually wind up eating leavened bread almost 8 days because you start on the 14th, or the evening of the 14th. And then you go for another 7 days from the day of the first day of unleavened bread to the last day of unleavened bread. We just did this, so it should be fresh in our minds. The next thing that Moses is given in Leviticus 23 picks up at verse 10. And he says, "Speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, you shall reap its harvest. Then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah for your acceptance." Now, I got it highlighted up there. I want you guys to notice that. If you're watching on your phones, you can see it. If you can see it behind me. This is when they go into the land they're supposed to do this. So this becomes a memorial of the next thing you do after unleavened bread. You then bring in the harvest. Each person was to bring in a piece of their harvest and bring it to the priest. And the idea of it, at least the way it says it here, it says, "He shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah for your acceptance." The purpose of going there was for your acceptance. And he says when they do it on the morrow after the Sabbath, that means, now to us, it's not a Sunday, but that's the equivalent for us. The morrow after the Sabbath is Sunday. So I'm using Sunday just to make it easier for we who have the Gregorian mindset and the calendar that we live under. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest waves it. Now I'm skipping a couple of verses. You can go back and you can read them, but this is just to get the gist of what's being said. Verse 14 then says, "And you do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your Elohim." He means the first fruit. You don't eat bread, you don't eat grain. Now in the tradition in the Jewish tradition, in the Pharisaic tradition, of which we are most familiar with, the idea is that you don't eat any of the new harvest. You don't eat anything until you bring the first fruit of your barley harvest. That's the tradition. And it does say that because it says, "Do not eat bread, roasted grain, or fresh grain." The "or fresh grain" would mean the barley harvest, the new grain that you're bringing in. But it also says, "Don't eat bread or roasted grain." It doesn't identify which bread or which roasted grain. It just says, "Don't eat bread, don't eat grain, until the same day that you brought an offering," meaning the wave offering before Elohim. "This is a law forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. And on the morrow after the Sabbath," again, Sunday after unleavened bread. Now that's how we're doing it. That's the calendar that we're following. We're separating this concept of unleavened bread, 7 days commanded to eat, from a commandment that says don't eat any bread and then bring a wave offering. It'd be kind of tough not to eat any bread and be commanded to eat bread and then to obey both of the commandments at the same time. Now again, Jewish tradition is very, very different. And that's what most of us know, what most of us understand, is the Jewish tradition of it. But I want to speak to you about both of them so we can actually hopefully see it and make up our own minds in the text. So I'm reading it as, "And from the morrow after the Sabbath, the Sunday after unleavened bread, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, you shall count for yourself 7 complete Sabbaths. Today begins the first day of the counting of the Omer. This is what it becomes called, the counting of the Omer. And the counting of the Omer is a count up. Now, normally in our culture, when we're heading to something, if you watch, I don't know, NASA or Elon Musk, SpaceX, and they're shooting off a rocket, you always count down, right? 10, 9, 8, 7, right? But Elohim wants us to count up. Same principle, same idea. So the idea of a countdown is the anticipation to something, right? So the whole purpose of a countdown is that something's going to happen at 1 or 0, obviously blast off. Same principle here. We count upwards 7 weeks or 49 days, and on the 50th day, something happens. It is a memorial of something. But it begins with the waving of the sheaf. Again, the purpose of at least what is spoken to us here. I'm not talking about tradition, be it Christian or Jewish tradition, just telling you what the text says. The reason for the waving of the sheaf is for our acceptance before Yahuwah. It goes on to say, after 7 complete Sabbaths, verse 16, until the morrow after, again, that's a Sunday, until the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, so that would now be the 50th day, you count 50 days, and you shall bring a new grain offering to Yahuwah, and we call that Shavuot or Shavuot. In the Greek, we would say Pentecost. So the bringing of the barley is in the beginning, the grain offering, a wave offering. 50 days later, and it's also supposed to be fine grain that you bring. You can mill up the grain. But 50 days later, you don't bring grain, you bring bread. Bread that's baked already. And that has leaven inside of it. And that also becomes a wave offering before Elohim. So that's the process, at least the way we read it here. So for us, the things that are different from things we have done in the past to where we are today, we're not doing unleavened bread in the middle of, we're not doing first fruits in the middle of unleavened bread. This is how it seems the Zadok calendar is laid out, because it shows us that unleavened bread and the first fruits are separated by about 5 days from the time that it ends to the time that unleavened bread ends to the time that first fruits begins. Again, it's very different from what we've known, very different from what we've understood, because we are thinking first fruits. Messiah is the first fruits of those born from among the dead. And he absolutely, positively is. There is no doubt that the Mashiach is the first fruits of those born from among the dead. I want to propose to you something to think about, to judge for yourself, consider for yourself. While that is absolutely true that Messiah is the firstborn from among the dead, this particular feast, even though that's the Jewish tradition, or really the Sadduceic tradition, what this is telling us is the wave offering is for our acceptance. It's for us. It's a representation of us, our first fruits. Now keep that in the back of your mind. We'll get to that in a second. We already have established that the entire festival season is a mirror image of the story of the Exodus. In fact, all of it, all the way up to the fall feast, are a mirror image of the entire Exodus story, all the way up to the wandering in the wilderness to tabernacles. But for our sakes, for today, and hopefully you guys can see that up there, I've sort of put a chart, and what you can do is, if you guys want to screen print this, or maybe I can print it out later for anybody who wants it, really, really, really simple chart. On there, the chart goes from one end to the other, and it starts at Passover. Now, there's 3 things I want you to think about here. There is the Exodus story, the actual Exodus story that occurs. It is a mirror, or the feast days become a mirror of the actual Exodus story. But I also want you to realize the story of Messiah, the gospel, it is also a mirror, or rather everything else was a reflection of the gospel story. So there should be a similar pattern in all 3 of them. Now, I color-coded it, so hopefully it makes more sense to you guys. But if you look up there, it starts the Exodus, just the top line, in, I guess that's blue. The whole story starts at Passover, right? It starts in Egypt. What's Egypt about? Eventually, the last plague, Passover, that gets them out. And it seems that, doesn't seem that, it absolutely is, Passover and matzot, or unleavened bread, are linked together. They happen back to back together, because the night you eat the Passover is the night you start eating unleavened bread. And then for 7 more days, you eat unleavened bread. So those two absolutely seem to be linked together. They're linked together in the feast as well, but just for the top line. Going to the next thing, now I put it in blue because do we link this together with the feast of unleavened bread and the feast of Passover or not? I don't know for sure, but we know the next real major event in the Exodus is the Red Sea. How could that not be a major event? Now, when it happened, we don't know. Nobody knows for sure. There's tradition as to when it happened, and the tradition may be absolutely right, but it's still tradition. Nobody knows when it happened. Did it happen sometime during the week? Did it happen after the 7 days of unleavened bread? We just don't know. But we know in the story, the Red Sea eventually comes, where they cross over, and Pharaoh and his army dies, and they come up alive on the other side. So I'm just, for the sake of argument, for where we are today, I'm linking it to the story of Passover and matzot. So that's why it's all in blue. Everybody with me so far? I don't want to lose anybody. That's why it's all in blue there. The next big part of the story then becomes the manna. Because after they get out of the Red Sea, there's rejoicing. This is chapter 15 of the book of Exodus. They sing the song, the horse and the rider thrown into the sea. Everybody's happy. Everybody's wonderful, happy about the salvation Elohim has just provided for them. Then comes chapter 16, where they start grumbling about 2 things specifically. They grumble about drink, water, and they grumble about food. There's no food. So definitely by the time, and of course the answer to all of this becomes the manna. Well, there's 2 answers to it. We'll get to both of them. But eventually it becomes the manna. The quail, the manna, the water at Marah. There's an answer to it. But that answer is not linked to Passover, nor is it linked to unleavened bread. Sometime after they go through the Red Sea is when the story of the matzot comes. Excuse me, the story of the manna. I said matzot, manna, bread, unleavened. Been eating so much unleavened bread this week, or the last couple. In fact, I had a piece yesterday. I don't know what it is. I had a hankering for a piece of unleavened bread yesterday. All right, so there's the manna. Then the next part of the story, and where the manna leads us to when the manna starts falling, is to get the people to Mount Sinai. Where at Mount Sinai, they hear the voice of Elohim, they make the covenant, they hear the voice of Elohim, and of course the commandments are given. Traditionally, we call that Shavuot. Again, we're talking about, this is tradition we've received from Pharisees, from the scribes, from rabbis today. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I want to read what the story actually says, not necessarily the tradition that comes from rabbis before us. But we do know the end of this is to get to Sinai. Sinai's important. Whatever happens in Sinai, we refer to as Shavuot today. Or really, first fruits. It is the real first fruits. It's the bread offering. Starts with the wave offering in the Moedim, but in the story, it starts after they get out of Egypt. And of course, color-coded. Underneath it is the story of Leviticus 23, the pattern we just read. Leviticus 23, actually it first starts off with explaining Shabbat. Shabbat is 6 days, 7 days, 6 days you work, 7th day you don't. That's a feast. Believe it or not, every Shabbat is a feast to Elohim. It is a Moedim. Every Shabbat is a Moedim. Not that it's a feast day that you got to go to Jerusalem, but it is something that Elohim has set as an appointed time for us to do, something you're supposed to remember. This is Leviticus chapter 23, verse 1. Passover is then mentioned, which aligns with the story of the Exodus. Passover is the beginning of the feast cycle for all of us. And Passover and matzot are absolutely linked together. Then comes the Red Sea. Well, there's no real anything in the feast cycle that represents the Red Sea. So, but when we fast forward to the New Testament, what do the New Testament writers, including Messiah, equate the death and resurrection to? Well, Saul tells us in chapter 6 of Romans that when you and I go into the mikveh, we die. And when we come up out, like Messiah died. And when we come up out of the mikveh, we are alive, just like Messiah is alive. We're supposed to live in him now until the day of resurrection, when we shall be alive eternally with him. So Saul is the one who connects mikveh with death and resurrection. Messiah also connects it with death and resurrection. If you look on the verses just under that, here's Mark chapter 10, verse 38. This is a master's words. But Yeshua said to them, you do not know what you ask. They're asking Messiah, can we sit on thrones with you? We want to rule with you. We want to be there with you. So Messiah says, you do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? Hold on a second. What's the cup that Messiah drank? This takes us right back to Gethsemane, right? This is the story just before the Passover, the night before his crucifixion, the night of the Passover. What's he doing? He's in the garden. He's praying, can this cup pass from me? This is a Hebrew idiom. Having the cup pass from you means whatever I have to do, if I start doing it, if I put the cup to my lips, I got to do what? Got to drink the whole thing. You can't take a sip of it and put it down. This is just a Hebrew idiom. The idea is if you pick up a cup, you're supposed to drink the whole cup. And we see this even in the Passover, the way our Jewish brethren do Passover, because during the Passover, it's like a 4 or 5 hour thing that you actually go through, doing all of the different pieces of the Exodus story. And I think there's 4 glasses of wine or 5 glasses of wine that you drink throughout the, so I guess for 4 hours, you need 4 glasses of wine after 4 hours they're sitting there, but they drink the cup. They take the cup, they put it to them, they drink it, and then the ceremony goes on, and you get to the next one. So here's Messiah saying, the cup is the equivalent of, we now know, the crucifixion. That's what he's talking about. Can this pass from me? Of course, he says, not my will, but yours. Then he goes on, you do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? And be immersed. Well, that's sort of the scripture's way of saying it. And be baptized. And be mikvahd with the mikvah that I am mikvahd, if mikvahd is even a word, but mikvahd, I guess, I don't know. You go in the water. Can you be mikvahd with the mikvah that I will be? So Messiah now is equating the drinking of the cup with the death and resurrection and all the stuff he's going to go through, but he's also comparing it to the mikveh. Now it makes sense why later on Saul would come and realize that we are also go through the waters of mikveh, and in doing so we identify with the death and the resurrection. So there is definitely a New Testament correlation somewhere in there. Again, there's nothing in the actual story that we read that identifies the Red Sea as that, except when we get to the New Testament, it identifies the crossing of the Red Sea with the death and resurrection. Again, what day it happened on, nobody can be sure. But, so I just put a question mark there, but I'm kind of linking the death and resurrection, which is not at all wrong, because that's the way it happens. He is the Passover, he dies, and in the middle of unleavened bread, he raises. Then, in the red there, then the counting of the Omer. At least in the story above, the counting of the Omer happens after. The question is, does it happen after he actually rises, when he rises that day, or does it happen days later? And of course, in the calendar we're following, it happens days later. In the story, the actual story, it also happens days later. And then, of course, Shavuot, counting the 50 days up to Shavuot. So is the festival season, does it represent the actual days of the actual Exodus? In memorial it does, because when you actually read Leviticus 16, it's not 50 days from the time that the manna falls that they get to Mount Sinai. It's only like 15 days, a month, 30 days. It's like 30 days from about 30 days, just under 30 days from the time that the manna starts falling till they actually get to Shavuot, get to the mountain, and they hear the voice of Elohim. So it's not representative of the actual number of days, but it is representative in the order of the story that it happens after the Red Sea. At least the way I'm thinking about this. Now, underneath is the gospel story, Messiah, the death and resurrection, Passover. His baptism, his mikvah, is death and resurrection. After that comes, at least the way the gospel writers tell us, 40 days Messiah was with them, teaching them. This becomes representative of the days of counting the Omer. And we'll find out exactly why in just a couple of seconds. And then after all of this, Messiah tells them the day he's going to ascend, go to Jerusalem, tarry, wait for the promise of my Father, the Holy Spirit. That is going to be Shavuot for us as the weeks go on. Wait for the promise of my Father, for not many days from now. Well, if it's been 40 days of him doing whatever he's doing all this teaching, and he's now ascending, how many more days? If this is counting the Omer, how many more days to Shavuot? 10. And then that would be the 50th day, Shavuot, the day the Spirit comes and they speak in tongues and all the different languages. That's the pattern. At least that's the pattern the way I see it and I understand it. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying this is how I see it. Okay. So with all of that and the verses that we just sort of identified showing resurrection, at least in type here, let's go back to the actual narrative of coming out of Egypt, because that's where everything begins. This is I don't know what number it is, number 5 on your notes. So in the actual narrative of Exodus chapter 15, they go through the Red Sea. They rejoice, they sing, the horse and the rider is thrown into the sea, Miriam plays the tambourine, all that crazy, that wonderful stuff goes on. At some point, food runs out. It doesn't tell us exactly, actually it does, because it gives us a date here, but at some point, the food runs out. And the drink runs out. Whatever water they brought with them, whatever food they brought with them, they're not eating unleavened bread anymore, are they? In fact, they're not eating what? Anything anymore at this point. They become hungry first. This is the story of Mara, the place where they camped. Here's Exodus chapter 15, verse 24. It says, "And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, 'What are we to drink?' Then he cried out to Yahweh, and Yahweh showed him a tree. And when he threw it into the waters were made sweet." So at Mara, which means bitter, the waters were bitter. They weren't good to drink. And amazingly, just taking this tree, this branch, and putting it into the water makes the waters sweet to drink. There he made a law and a right ruling for them, and there he tried them. Now that word tried sometimes is written as tempting or temptation, but it means to test. How did Elohim test them? Just without going any further in the story, what was the test for them? Hunger will be the next test, and that's part of it, but in this particular part of the text, the test is thirst. Right? We've got nothing to drink. We've got nothing to drink. We need water. And of course, now this wonderful miracle comes. And so he tried them or tested them. This was a test for them. And what's the test? Verse 26. And he said, here's the test. "If you will diligently obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, to do what is right in his eyes, and shall listen to his commandments, and shall guard all his laws, I shall bring on you none of the diseases that I brought on the Egyptians, for I am Yahweh who heals you." So the purpose of the test was to see if his people would what? Obey. And not just obey whatever it is about the water. He wants to see if they're going to obey everything. do they have a heart? If they got a heart to obey what I'm saying now, then they're going to have a heart to obey everything else that comes. And this idea of them not having the sicknesses and the things that came upon Egypt, it means the plagues. Those judgments will not come upon you if you obey my commandments and you follow my instructions, my right rulings. This is a test. This is important for us to understand. This is a test. Now, Exodus chapter 16, which is really just the next verse when you read this. Again, there's no chapters in the original writings, so it's not really a chapter, it's just a continuation of a thought. Exodus chapter, or of a narrative. Exodus chapter 16, verse 1 tells us the day now. On the 15th day of the second new moon, meaning month, which means it's been a month since they got out of Egypt, because they got out of Egypt on the 15th day. Right? That's when they got out. It was the 14th you eat, the 15th we left. In the morning, they started eating unleavened bread. That night, they ate it, I guess, until the unleavened bread, and all the bread runs out. After the second month, after the going out of Egypt, and all the congregation of the children of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. So first they're grumbling about thirst. Now they're grumbling about food. And the children of Israel said to them, if only we had died by the hand of Yahweh in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat and when we ate bread to satisfaction. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to put all this assembly to death with hunger. And Yahweh said to Moses, see, I am raining bread from the heavens for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion. Now, I put the PDP in there, but this word appears later on in the text, so you don't think it's just something I'm adding there. The day's portion is an omer. He says, I'm going to rain down bread from heaven so you guys can go out and gather a day's portion. Now, if you listen to Wednesday's Bible study, you guys know some of this already, but an omer is roughly for us, you know what like a bag of flour looks like? It's like 2 bags of flour. That's what an omer is. So you go out and you grab 2 bags of flour for your home, for your family, and you cook that for the day's portion. I'm raining down bread from the heavens, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion, an omer, every day, in order to test them, to see whether they will walk in my Torah or not. So why did Elohim allow them to be thirsty? Why did he allow them to be hungry? To test them, to get them to a point that in their flesh, they're thinking even about Egypt, to see if they would actually concern themselves and have their heart be obedient to the instruction. He's going to deal with the fleshly need, but he's dealing with something much, much bigger than that, and that's the heart to obey. You know, it's tough to obey when the flesh is going in a different direction, isn't it? When you're sick, when you're hurting, when you're mad, when you're upset at somebody, when you're having a fight with somebody, it's hard. It's hard to be godly, isn't it? It's hard to be obedient when the flesh is riled up, or the flesh is just in its own zone. It's hard to grab hold of that and spiritually think and gain control of it, and in your mind make your body do what you know in the spirit and in the heart you should do. This is a test. That's called being hungry. When the flesh wants one thing and is not getting the one thing, but Elohim offers something else. He does this to test them, and he does it to test us as well. The story is cyclical. Every day in order to try them to see whether they will walk in my Torah or not. So now here comes chapter 16, verse 22. It's not verse 2222. That's a typo. If you're looking for verse 2222, good luck. Verse 22 says, and it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. So he tells them in the narrative, go out 6 days, each day gather 1 omer, or 2 bags of flour, or manna, the bread. But on the 6th day, you grab twice as much. Because on the 7th day, there's not going to be any what? It's not going to be the store's not open. Store's closed. So you get everything you need on that 6th day, so that on the 7th day you've got bread to eat. Gather twice as much, 2 omers. So you see that the word is actually used there. It's omer. So the connection to the feast of counting the omer is right here. Connect 2 omers for each one. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses, and he said to them, "This is what Yahweh has said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Sabbath set apart to Yahweh." Now, if you've checked out Wednesday's Bible study, this is the first Sabbath. There is no day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7 prior to this. There is in Abraham and Noah and all the rest of that, but it seems like in Egypt, Israel adopted whatever the Egyptians did. And when Elohim tells them this is now the first of your months, and on the 14th day, he doesn't tell them what day, meaning what day of the week. He tells them what date of the month. There's a difference between the day of the week and the date of the month, isn't there? They're not the same thing. So it's on the 14th day. That's all we hear is the 14th day. We have no idea what day the 14th day actually falls on until here. Because now we know what date the first Shabbat falls on, the 23rd of the 2nd month. So all you got to do now is count backwards, and you'll go right to the day of the first Passover, a Tuesday, the 3rd day of the week. Not by my reckoning, by math, as it appears here. So with all of that said, this is actually the instruction is, this whole Omer thing is about what? A test to see if you will obey. And what's the first thing, the first major thing he gives them to obey? Sabbath. That's the first one. We're not even at Mount Sinai yet, right? We don't have the 10 Commandments yet, but there's instruction already. There's Torah already. And there's testing already to see if you will obey what it is that I have said to you, that you'll have it in your heart, even when your flesh doesn't want to do it, that you would be willing to do it. And Shabbat, Sabbath, the rest becomes the first principle. He's defined what a week is. It's 6 days, and the 7th you rest, and then it starts all over again. All right, with all of that said, you can check out Wednesday's study for more of the math on this and the charts and all the rest of that. It's really an incredible study. Guys, I don't know why, again, I'm having trouble with this. If you guys can go to the next slide, number 7. Thank you. Number 6 on your notes, guys. One back, guys. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm looking at that. That's the preview. Yeah, that's the right one. That's the right one. All right. So again, what did Elohim teach them? He taught them Sabbath. He also taught them when to work, when not to work, which is obviously connected to Sabbath. But what did he teach them first? Hunger. He taught them hunger first. He showed them how powerful the flesh is. You ever see those commercials for like Snickers bars? And I don't know, there's a guy and he looks like a weightlifter or something, and he's mad and he's nasty and all of a sudden they give him a Snickers because he's hangry, and he turns into this little old lady. That's who it really was. These people were hangry. And you know what? We can judge them, but you really shouldn't. Because how long was it? Was it 2 weeks they went without bread? A week? How long did they go without water? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days? Try going without water 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. Try going without food for a week or so, and you will be hangry. So don't judge them. But they were dealing with the flesh. This became a test for them. And it's not a test that ends in the counting of the Omer. It's a test that begins in the counting of the Omer. So what is Elohim doing with them at the beginning of the counting of the Omer that is different from all other peoples on the planet so far? They are the first fruits of people to hear and obey and be tested and given the instruction and go through hunger and then have this miraculous thing provided for them. They are the first ones of all the other nations that will later on, in the time of Messiah, all nations will begin to come and understand. And even earlier than that, nations could come and be part of the house of Israel and worship the God of Elohim. But this is the first group of people that this is done with. This is important. Keep that in the back of your mind. They are a nation unlike others. And this is going to become part of this Shavuot story when he makes covenant with them. They're a nation above all other nations. The first of all other nations to receive. So, this doesn't just last, or doesn't just go through the time of counting of the Omer. This goes the entire 40 years. And really, way beyond that. It goes all the way up to the time until Joshua comes to bring them into the land. Then the manna stops. So manna was falling for a long, long, long time. Here's Deuteronomy chapter 8. Now this is not at the time of the beginning of the giving of the manna. This is at the time when they're just about to go into the land. So 40 years have passed of manna already. And listen to what Elohim says about the 40 years. Deuteronomy 8, chapter 8, verse 2. And you shall remember that Yahweh your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, to prove you. What does prove mean? Test. Is this any different? Is he telling them any different from what we just read in chapter 15, chapter 16? No. To humble you, to prove you, to know what was in your heart, whether you guard his commandments or not. These 40 years to know what was in your heart. Look at verse 3. And he humbled you, and he let you what? Feel hunger. Suffer hunger. Feel how strong the flesh really can be when the flesh wants what it wants. This was a test, not just on the day of the beginning of the Omer, all the way through 40 years later. The test goes on day after day after day after day of going out and getting the manna. And he humbled you, and he let you suffer hunger, and fed you with manna which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that man does not live by bread alone. Whatever this manna represents, because they actually say, what is it? And the whole term manna means, what is it? Most of you guys know that. That's literally what manna means. What is it? So technically, the name of our church is Living What Is It? But we don't say that. That doesn't really sound very good. So we call it just manna. But living whatever. Living manna. So he humbled you. He suffered you. Your fathers didn't know it. Meaning they didn't know what the manna was. But I think there's a there's a remez here. There's a hidden meaning here. What didn't they know? Commandments. They didn't know instructions yet. And the whole idea was to test them to see if they would obey the instructions or not. Your fathers didn't know, to make you know, and so here's the purpose. To make you know that man does not live by bread alone, the thing your body was hungering for, water alone, the thing your throat was thirsting for. And you all know this verse. You don't live by bread alone, but by, say it with me, every word that comes from the mouth of Yah. So this was a test to see if those who have gone through the Passover, those who have gone through the Red Sea, those who have gone through unleavened bread, those that have come out on the other side and rejoiced at all of this, would be obedient even when the flesh doesn't want to be. Oh boy, if that's not something you could apply to you and I. In fact, that is the story of all of us. That if we would obey every word that comes from the mouth of Elohim. So is the story really any different now than it was then? No, it's the same. It's bigger, Because it's not just the one nation that got called out. Now it's opened up to the first fruits of all nations to come. All peoples now to come. Here is Exodus chapter 16, going back to the narrative. Verse 25, it says, and Moses said, listen to this. Moses said, for today is a Sabbath to Yahweh. Today you do not find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, there is none. So this is the first test, right? I used to love tests in school. I really did, because it looked like I wasn't paying attention the whole time, and I probably really wasn't. But I just always had this knack of taking tests. If you don't know what it is, you mark C. And it worked. I got 80s, 90s. My teachers would hate me for it. You don't want to fail the first test. Right? If you fail the first test, that doesn't look good for what? For everything else that's coming, because that really defines what's in the heart. And really, it means mind. That this is a Hebrew idiom. When you say heart, it doesn't mean the thing pumping in your chest. It means the thing in between. In fact, it doesn't even mean your brain. It means your soul, the intent, the thing that drives you. So if the test is between hunger, physical hunger, and spiritual hunger, which do I want satisfied? That's what the test becomes. That's the whole reason for all of this. And the first thing becomes Shabbat. Will you be obedient? Number, I don't know what number this is for you guys. It's number 8. I think it's number 7. Oh, yeah, I'm still on 6. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yep, you're right. So he tells them 6 days, do that, 7th you don't. I want to compare this now to the story in the Gospel of John. So you see that this is exactly the reference Messiah is making. John chapter 6 and verse 53. Did I? I think I'm sorry, guys. I can't make it go. Go back one more. Is it up there? All right. Sorry, guys. I don't have control of it over here. Mine's actually on the left. Actually, it's jumping all over the place now. We're on John chapter 6, right? Let me make sure I got the right ones. Yeah, we are. John chapter 6, number 6 on the slide, or really number 7 on our slides. John chapter 6, verse 53. Just told them, take it 6 days. On the 7th, nothing's going to be there. That's the Shabbat. Did they listen? A lot of them do, but not everybody does. Here's John chapter 6, verse 53. This deals with food and drink. What was the whole story about we just read, or the narrative? Food and drink. After Passover, after unleavened bread, after the Red Sea, after the rejoicing, it's about food and bread. Yeshua therefore said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the son of Adam, notice he calls himself son of Adam here. We know what that means now. It's not the same thing as son of man. It's not the same thing as Mashiach or son of God, because those are also synonyms for the king of Israel. It can be. It does later on mean something bigger, but son of Adam is referring to Daniel chapter 7 and the book of Enoch, the one who stands in the presence on a throne right next to Elohim the Father. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the son of Adam and drink his blood, this is about food and drink, you possess no life in yourselves. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood possesses everlasting life, and I shall raise him up in the last day. For my flesh is truly food, and my blood is truly drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood stays in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because the Father, so he who feeds on me shall live because of me. This is the bread which came down out of heaven, not as our fathers ate the manna and died. He who eats this bread shall live forever. What was the reason for sending the manna and telling them to go out every day? To see if they would be obedient to every word that comes from the voice of Elohim. What is the giving of the living bread from heaven for? To see if we would be obedient to every word that proceeds from the mouth. There's no difference. It's the same story. It's bigger now. He's telling us it's not stuff that, bread that's falling from heaven. It is the bread. That was a type, a story, a shadow to get us to understand the bigger thing later on. And the bigger thing, obviously, is Messiah. So if in the first story they're to go out and they're tested and tried to see if they would live by every word, not just the physical bread. Remember how this whole story starts off. He just finished feeding all of those people what? Bread and fish. And they all followed him. Why? It tells us right in the text. You didn't follow me for spiritual stuff. You followed me because you ate bread and you had fish. If we follow him with this, it's the wrong reason. If we learn how to hunger from this and eat other bread, that leads to everlasting life and obedience to every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Elohim. This is the bread as, verse 57. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so he who feeds on me shall live because of me. This is the bread which came down out of the heaven. Not as your fathers ate the manna and died. He who eats this bread shall live forever. So is he referring to the manna? Obviously. He just told us. This is the story. He's telling them the manna was actually about him. He is the bread of life. What will, I guess, sort of eventually, within a 300-year or so period of the speaking of these words, what will eventually become the doctrine is that Messiah has come and the things that he told us are different from what Elohim said before. And the words will be changed. The ideas changed and replaced with man's doctrine, religious doctrine. Did Messiah come and speak anything that the Father has not said? What did the Father say in Deuteronomy 15? This is a test. Are you going to obey? 16. This is a test. Are you going to obey? What did he say in Exodus 19 when he gives the commandments? This is a test to see if you'll obey. What does it say every time he talks about the covenant? If you will obey, if you will do all that I have asked you, all the commandments, all the right rulings, if you'll obey, then you'll be this. It's always about if you will obey. Those are his words. So you're telling me Messiah came and gave different words? No. And to say that is dangerous. It's very dangerous. Why? Because this is a test. And if you start going down that road, guess what you don't have? The right answer. Now you're marking D on a little Scantron sheet. You never mark D on the Scantron. It's always C. This is out of the gospel account. Every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Elohim. Messiah says it in Matthew 4, Luke 4, but here's John chapter 14, verse 15. If you love me, you shall guard my commandments. What commandments? Verse 24, he who does not love me does not guard my words, and the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father who sent me. Do we believe that Father at some point changes his desire and his word for us? No, he is the same. Elohim is the same. Yes, Messiah even the same yesterday, today, and forever. His word is established in the heavens and it does not change. It just doesn't change. Messiah has come to help us understand it better, but not to change it. They're not my words, they're the words of the Father who sent me. So is Messiah telling us some words that Father has not already said? No. He's just explaining them in ways we have not understood before. Number 7 on your notes. Even though, thank you guys, number 8 up there. Even though in the text, in the instruction, they're told to take it for 6 days, twice as much on the 6th, nothing on the 7th. You can't go out on the 7th. Here's Exodus chapter 16, verse 19. And on the title there, neither did they, and nor do we very often, we still don't obey. And by we, I mean just in general. Not talking about you guys, not beating you guys up. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. Exodus chapter 16, verse 19. The narrative now goes on. And Moses said, let no one leave any of it until morning. So when you went out every day, you got enough for the day. And if you decided, I really want to sleep in tomorrow, so I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to stick it under my bed and we're going to wrap it up really good so I don't have to wake up tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow when I get up, I can take whatever's there and I can make my bagels or whatever you're going to make out of the manna. I'm going to make my manna breakfast. What's going to happen? Well, it says, and he said, do not leave it until morning. And they did not listen to Moses. What did they just do? They failed. Yeah, they disobeyed. You guys are right. They failed. They failed what? The test. The test. And they did not listen to Moses, and some of them left part of it until morning. And it bred worms, and it stank. And you can see the picture up there. It's just sort of an illustration of it. They saved that underneath. Imagine putting that under your bed. You wake up the next morning. I'm sure your tent smells ripe. And you can't eat it. Why? Because you did not have a heart to obey. You did what you wanted to do. You thought, he doesn't really mean what he says. I believe in him. I love him. We came out of Egypt. But he doesn't really mean every day, I got to go out, I got to get this stuff. When Elohim says something, he, let every word of Elohim be true and every word of man be a. They left it till morning and it bred worms and it stank. And Moses was pissed. Oh, I'm sorry. It says Moses was wroth, which is just ancient Hebrew for pissed. He was wroth with them. Verse 26, the instruction becomes, gather it 6 days, and on the 7th, which is the Sabbath, remember the first Sabbath, this is a focal point. This is a North Star to help us understand calendar, which is the Sabbath. Don't go out there because there won't be any. Now, I want you to picture this in your mind. I should have made a picture of this. Imagine 6 days you're going out there, everybody's grabbing their manna. And on the sixth day, you're out there with everybody. Everybody's grabbing their manna, and you see that they've got 4 bags of flour, 4 bags of manna, because now you got to get double. And you're thinking, man, that's a lot to carry. The 2's fine. We'll deal with this tomorrow. Elohim doesn't mean what he says. And then the next morning, and now you got to figure, what is there? 3, 4, 5 million people, maybe 3, 4 million people out in the wilderness at this point. And the next morning, there's 100, 200 people get up bright and early in the morning, and they go out to the field, and they're alone. Nobody else is around. Sister Karen and I, a couple of years ago, we had I don't know how our service fell on Christmas Day. I guess Christmas fell on a Saturday or something. Fell on a Shabbat. So we did I think it was a Sunday service. I don't know, whatever we were doing. We whatever day it was. It couldn't have been a Shabbat. Because we went out afterward to go to Taco Bell. I know. This was back when I was really, really fat. We went out to go to Taco Bell. What are you laughing about? We went out to Taco Bell, and we got there, and we're like, oh, man, it's great. Nobody's here. And we go right through the line, and we get up to the thing, and we're like, hey, yeah, I'll have a blah, 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 blah. Hello? Hello? We're sitting there like idiots for 2 minutes. And then Karen goes, hey, there doesn't look to seem to be anybody in there. And I'm looking like, oh man, why is nobody here? And Karen's like, oh wait, today's Christmas. That's the feeling they had that morning when they went out. This big dumbfounded look on you like, oh, yeah. No wonder the store's empty. No wonder it's closed. And yet people went out. Because that's what it tells us. Gather 6 days, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, there is none. And it came to be that some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather, but they found none. Elohim didn't mean what he said. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. John chapter 6, Messiah speaking to the disciples, to all the disciples, the ones that just ate the bread. This is the bread which came down out of heaven, not as your fathers ate manna and died. He who eats this bread shall live forever. Therefore, many of his taught ones, having heard, said, this word is hard. Who is able to hear it? But Yeshua, knowing within himself, his taught ones were grumbling about this. When you read these words in your mind, you're supposed to go back to what? Exodus 15, Exodus 16. They're grumbling about drink. They're grumbling about food. We got to go out every day. Then we got to get 2 more at double portion on Friday. Elohim didn't mean what he said. It's in your mind. You got to go all the way back to that because that's what he wants us to do. That's what this story is about. His taught one said, "This who is able to hear it?" But Yeshua, knowing within himself that his taught ones were grumbling about this, he said to them, "Does this make you stumble? But there are some of you who do not believe." For Yeshua knew from the beginning who they were who did not believe and who would deliver him up. I want to highlight that for a second. I want you to think about that, meditate on that for a second. Messiah knows who it is that believes, and he knows who it is that doesn't believe. Doesn't matter if you were there at the feeding of the 5,000. Doesn't matter if you were there at the Sermon on the Mount. It doesn't matter if you were one of the guys that were healed in whatever Shabbat service it was that he did it. If you were following him around and all of a sudden you get to this point and you're thinking, yeah, well, I've been with him. He knows who believes and who doesn't. Wow. That's a heavy. That's a heavy. Who would deliver him up? Verse 6. From then on, many of his taught ones withdrew and were not walking with him anymore. They didn't listen. They didn't believe. It got too hard for them. It also got too hard, and they didn't believe in the wilderness. And they let it stay overnight, and they went out on the 7th day, and they tried to get it, and it just wasn't there. This test has been a problem for the people of Yah throughout the book. You guys can go to the next one. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. This test has been a problem for the people of Yah all throughout history. Here's Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 10. Now this is way after the Exodus, way after that. They're in Babylon now. And he's reviewing the era of Israel. That has been the era of Israel all the way through. He says, "So I took them out of the land of Egypt, and I brought them into the wilderness. And I gave them my laws, and I showed them my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And I also gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between them and me, to know that I am Yahuwah who sets them apart. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my laws, and they rejected my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And they greatly profaned my Sabbaths." And guys, I could probably spend the next half an hour showing you verse after verse, from book after book after book, all the way through the prophets, where they keep doing the same thing over and over and over. I won't do that, but it's there. You guys can look it up for yourselves, get a concordance, look it up, and you'll find all the different references to it. So it's not new. They started failing the test there after Marah. On the 15th day as they got there, on the 17th day as the bread started to fall, all the way up to the 23rd day of the first Shabbat. People started failing the test. On the first Shabbat, You failed the first Shabbat. Not like the third one, the first one. The first one. And they were also doing it in the days of Messiah. They were doing it differently, but they were still failing. Messiah, Luke chapter 6, verse 2, and some of the Pharisees said to them, "Why do your disciples do what is not right on the Sabbath?" This Messiah and his disciples walking and taking the grain, rubbing it in their hands to get the meat on the inside and eating it. This is not a breaking of the Sabbath according to the Torah. This is the breaking of the Sabbath according to halakha, Jewish law. Unfortunately, in our Bibles, the word law, or in our Bibles, the way it's translated, the word law is the word law. And there's no differentiation between them. And this oftentimes we're reading in our Bible is not talking about Elohim's law, the Torah. It's talking about the halakha, or the halakha of the Jews, the tradition. What was the ruling of their day? And their ruling of the day is you couldn't even take a couple of grains and do that. Now, should they have prepared for the Shabbat? Yeah, probably, but, stuff happens, I guess. And they're with Messiah anyway, so if you got a get-out-of-jail-free card, Messiah is it. But because of their view, that is the Pharisees, their rules, their traditions, they judged the disciples and Messiah for doing what is not right to do on the Sabbath. Do you think that the one who's there with them throughout the wilderness, who speaks with them, who guides them, is going to come and break the Sabbath? That's the what? It's the first test. It's the first test. Do you really think Messiah came and he broke the first test? That he failed the first test? Is he or is he not the Mashiach of Israel? And the scribes and the Pharisees were watching him. This is same thing, Luke chapter 6. And the scribes and the Pharisees were watching him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath. Again, a tradition, a halakha. It's not Torah. It's not Moses. They are not following Moses. Messiah says this multiple times. Judaism today is not following Moses. They are following the halakha of the Pharisees, or really we would say the rabbis today. They are not following Moses. They are following the rabbis. That is not the same thing. They are following tradition. And I'm not just blaming them. We do the same thing. We also create our own rules and laws and religious this and religious that have nothing to do with the Torah, but like the Pharisees here, are indeed failing the first test. They were watching him closely to see whether he would heal on the Sabbath, for them to find an accusation against him for healing on the Sabbath. Mark chapter 2, verse 27, we did this like a week or so ago. Messiah says to them, "The Sabbath was made for man." What man? All men. All men. But who are the first ones that get it? The first fruits out of Egypt, through the Passover, through the unleavened bread, through the Red Sea, through the rejoicing, through hunger, now to have drink and to have food to eat. They were the first ones. But the Sabbath wasn't made just for the first ones. It was made for all men. All men. And of course, he goes on to say that the son of Adam himself is also the master of the Sabbath. Colossians 2:16. Saul understanding this. So here's Pharisaic misunderstanding, Pharisaic interpretation or halakha of their own belief of what Shabbat should be or should not. So instead of a day of rest, this becomes a day of burden because you can't do this, you can't do that, can't do this, can't do that. And people think, well, that means that the Torah is a burden. No. The halakha is a burden. The laws of the Jews are a burden. Their interpretation of the Torah or misinterpretation of the Torah is a burden. The Torah is not a burden. This was supposed to be a day of rest, a day of peace, a day of shalom. That's why we say on this day, Shabbat Shalom. So, do you think if that is what Messiah comes to teach and not fail in the test, do you think that Saul would now come along and tell those who want to walk according to the Passover, According to the unleavened bread, get the leaven out of you. According to the baptism, die and rise just like he did. And now to begin to drink the milk of the word, the bread, the beginning of it, to eat of his body, to drink of his blood. Do you think that he's going to tell those people who go through that same pattern, which is the same pattern that they went through in the Exodus, do you think now Saul's going to come and say, well, you don't have to do Sabbath. Sabbath's not for you. If he does, then don't read anything else Saul has ever written. Because that is not obeying every word that comes from the mouth of Elohim. If there is somewhere in here that we could find where Mashiach clearly says there is no longer a Sabbath, then I would say, okay, we're good. Does he say that anywhere? Nowhere. And yet, our halakha, and by our, I mean the Christian world around us for a long time, our halakha, our religious tradition, our law concerning this, we read these words that say, let no one therefore judge you in the eating or drinking or in respect of a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow which is to come, but the body is of Messiah. We teach that as, he's telling us you don't have to do this stuff anymore. Oh, wait a minute. I don't have to obey every word that comes from the mouth of Elohim. Is that what you're telling me? Yes. Wait, you're telling me that even though Messiah didn't say that explicitly, somebody has the authority somewhere down the line to change that and make it a different day, call it something else, give us a picture of him that's not Hebraic anymore, but that's now Roman or Greek or whatever? Is that right? Or is that any different than what the Pharisees and Sadducees were doing in the days of Messiah? Creating their own religious law, confusing the people, letting the blind lead the blind, and both of them falling into a ditch? Either Elohim's word is established in the heavens and it lasts forever, or it's not. There is no gray area. You are either hot or you're cold. If you're lukewarm, if you're trying to get along, if you're trying to have a foot in one world and in the other world, you're in trouble. If you stand on a little lake and get two boats and put one foot in one boat and one foot in the other boat and say, yeah, I believe everything Elohim has said, but this has changed and that has changed and that has changed. Sit in that boat, stand on that boat, let somebody cast that boat off. You know what's going to happen to you in about 10 seconds, if you even last that long? You're in the water. Or you're hurting real bad. You cannot have both feet in two different worlds. You just can't. You can't serve two masters. And here it is. So what he's really telling them is let no one, like the Pharisees and Sadducees, therefore judge you the way they judged Messiah, the way they judged the disciples, for eating and for drinking and for Sabbaths and for everything else they did. These are a shadow of what's to come. They teach us about Mashiach. He doesn't say don't do them. He says they teach us about Mashiach. Do they teach us about Messiah? Go back to the chart. Passover, unleavened bread, going through the Red Sea. That's the pattern of Messiah. They teach us. He didn't say don't do it. Never did he say don't do it. He said these are an everlasting ordinance for his people forever. So the question is, are you his people? The answer is yes. Here's sort of the kicker. And we'll get into this as the weeks go on. So what I want to do is over the next 7 weeks, is I want to go over the basic doctrines, not church doctrines. I'm not talking about church fathers. I'm talking about the prophets and the Torah and the words of Messiah and the words of the apostles. I want to go over, just because we only got 7 weeks to do it, we're going to go over 7 just basic things that should be so apparent to us. But if you look at our modern age today, we've changed them. They're no longer the thing that we do. We have this idea that somehow in this age of Gentiles, we have somehow replaced the ancient house of Israel. And he also changed all the rules and the laws and everything about it. and we live by a different set of rules and laws today. And you got to ask yourself, so, which has gone on for a long, long time. Many, many people have understood who Messiah is throughout the ages. So why would Elohim allow that to happen for so long throughout the church age, quote unquote church age? He knows who are his and whose are not. But the real question should be, then why now are we opening up our eyes to it? Why now are we starting to notice, wait a minute, I get that. The church fathers said this, and that. And they were right about a lot. They were wrong about stuff too. They're men, no different than any other man. How many preachers do you hear or teachers that you hear? We get it wrong. Just because a church father said it doesn't make it law. Doesn't make it Torah. What Elohim says ought to come out of our mouth or into us, eat of it, all of it. So we're going to go over some of this stuff because that's the same problem that we have today. We're not doing anything any different. So my question again is, so if in the first century they're doing this, as Gentiles are coming in, where did the Gentiles hear the gospel? Well, Saul and Peter. But where'd they go after they heard the gospel? Synagogue. They went to whatever local synagogue was, and they learned Moses, or they started their own fellowships. And who taught them? Whatever Jews that were there, whatever evangelists went out. And then at some point in church history, around the time of Constantine, even before that, there was such disgust for the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, that they pushed everything Hebraic out of the gospel story. And it became a Gentile-only story. This is not a Gentile-only story. This is two peoples. I have two sheepfolds. I must make the two sheepfolds one sheepfold. Not two different sheepfolds. We are grafted into the house of Israel. The house of Israel isn't grafted into the church. It's the other way around. And all of a sudden, I'm telling you, we go through these 7 weeks, you're going to realize, wait a minute, I know some of you know this already. Elohim knows who are his, and he knows who are not. He knows those that are following just because they're getting the flesh satisfied, just because they're getting their needs met, and he knows those who are hungering, and they need and they want more. And he will feed those who need and want more. But the first test is obedience. And normally, for most of us, and this isn't all of us, but I'd say probably for the vast majority of us, what's one of the first things you did when you started really beginning to understand the story? What's one of the first things you wanted to do? My first thing was I thought about Sabbath. It's like, wait a minute. How can we change that? I had a preacher of mine, a mentor of mine years and years and years ago, first pastor I was ever under, great man of God. He loved Elohim beyond understanding. The guy was just sold out for Yah. And I remember one day, it's just after I first got credentialed, first became a minister, he came up to me and said, in fact, he never let anybody, very, very rarely let anybody preach in his church. He would let me do it, which I took as a great honor. I remember him coming up to me one day, big AG guy, just total Assemblies of God guy. He just lived and breathed Assemblies of God. But he came up to me one day and he said, Dave, I really think we messed up with the Sabbath. He was getting older in his years. And what did he start thinking about? The Sabbath, because it's everywhere. And it's one of the reasons that all of the dilemma that falls on the house of Israel falls on the house of Israel. What happens if we fail the test too? So, why are we now opening up our eyes? Why are we seeing things a little bit differently? And it's not just us, it's happening all over the world. Why are things all of a sudden a little bit different for us? You know who we would be considered if we were living in the Middle Ages? Heretics. You know what would happen to you if you and I were living in the Middle Ages? You'd be strung out on the rack. You'd be burned at the stake. You'd have all your lands confiscated from you and given to the church. You'd be beaten, starved, and murdered, even for wanting to own Elohim's word. You would be a heretic. If you kept the Sabbath, you would be a heretic. These are the inquisitions of France and Spain and all throughout Europe. It goes on for hundreds, not decades, hundreds of years against people who are trying to understand this and live it. So why now? Here's why. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 11. I'll leave you with this for today. Last slide, guys. You guys go to the last slide. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 11. This is Moses. See, I'm gonna tell you something that it may seem awkward to hear at first, because we are so used to the idea that a New Testament has come and that all the old stuff has passed away, and that now in Messiah there's a brand new testament. There is no covenant given with any Gentiles. There isn't. There is covenant with Abraham, who is a Hebrew. Isaac and Jacob, who are Hebrews. There is covenant with Moses and the house of Israel, who are Hebrews. There is covenant with David, who is a Hebrew. And the new covenant is given with the house of Israel and the house of Ephraim. You and I are just grafted into it. We didn't replace them. We joined them in the covenant. That's a big difference. We joined them in the covenant. So, I know it sounds crazy. I know people might not realize this. All the words Moses said still apply. You say, yeah, but the house of Israel, they were scattered and they were sent all over the world and all the rest of this. They forsook the covenant. No, they were sent all over the world because that's part of the covenant. Elohim was keeping the covenant because he said, if you do this, then this is going to happen. He didn't say, if you do this, I'm going to cut you off from the covenant. He said, if you do this, then this is going to happen to you. These are the consequences. With every covenant, there's consequences. Just because you break a covenant doesn't mean that automatically, that's it, it's done, you're out of the covenant. No, it means that in the covenant, there are precautions that if you're dumb enough to do this, then this is what you're going to get to bring you back into compliance with the covenant. So that you do the right thing. And this is what Moses says. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 11. And it shall be when all these words come upon you, the blessings and the curse, for all the crazy stuff that they do, which I set before you, and you shall bring them back to your heart among all the nations. Because what was the judgment of the breaking of the covenant? I'm going to scatter you all over the nations. Scatter you everywhere. Where has the house of Israel been? The native-born been for the last 2,000 years. And even us, you and I, the believers that are grafted in, where are we? All over the world. All over the world. And you shall bring them back to your heart. Bring them back to your what? Heart. Among all the nations where Elohim drives you, and shall turn back to Yah your Elohim and obey his voice, according to all that I command you today, with all your heart and with all your being and with all your children. Then Yahweh Elohim shall turn back your captivity and shall have compassion on you, and he shall turn back and gather you from all the peoples where Yahweh your Elohim has scattered you. Verse 6. And Yahweh your Elohim shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed to love Yahweh your Elohim with all of your heart and with all of your being, so that you might live. And you shall turn back and obey the voice of Yahweh and do his commandments, which I command you today. For Yahweh turns back to rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your forefathers. If you obey the voice of Yah Elohim, guard his commandments and his laws, which are written in the book of the Torah, if you turn back to Yah your Elohim with all your heart and with all of your being. The whole reason for the testing was to see what was in your heart. Messiah comes and our hearts are now circumcised, which is exactly what Moses said. To do what? To want to obey. So why is this happening now? Because that's what Moses said was going to happen. That his children, scattered all over the world, at some point, their hearts are going to turn back to him. And they're going to want to obey. They're going to want to do. And what's tough is we've been away for so long, we're almost like groping in the dark to try to figure out what to do. But we're doing it. Let me ask you one final question here for this morning. This is all just, we're going to continue this for the next 7 weeks. Let me ask you something though. What's the difference between what we call the new covenant and the old covenant? I mean, if you were gonna narrow it down to just one thing. Now you could say, oh well, no, there's no priesthood. Yes, there is. Well, there's no temple. Yes, there is. Well, there's no high priest. Yes, there is. Well, there's no sacrifice. Yes, there is. And we can just go on and on and on and on. So what is different? Well, we're saved by grace through faith because of being connected to Abraham. Moses comes and says, I'm going to get you out of Egypt because Father remembered Abraham and the oath. They got out of Egypt by faith in the words of Moses by the blood of the Lamb. Through grace. They did nothing to earn it. So what's different? What's different about the new covenant? Hebrews 8:8. For finding fault with them. This is a quote of Jeremiah 31. For finding fault with them, meaning the people. What was the fault of the people right in the beginning as the first Shabbat is given? They didn't obey. They didn't obey because it wasn't in their heart. And it just continued and continued. Because of that, see, the days are coming, says Yah, when I shall conclude with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah a renewed covenant. Who's the new covenant made with? The house of Israel and the house of Judah. Who's not mentioned there? Christians. That's a good way of saying it. Gentiles. Probably a better way of saying it. Because Jews were Christians in the first century. That's what they were called from Antioch. It's just the name has taken on a different meaning as time has gone on. You know the way like Democrats like to change words? It's not abortion, it is unending motherhood or something like that. They use these crazy different phrases to sort of melt it down. Unaliving a person, all this crazy stuff. It's not torturing your children. It's compassionate health care or whatever it is. You can change words all you want. The meaning's a meaning. I digress. I'm sorry. I digress. So what's different? Here's the thing that's different. Because the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write it on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. What laws? All of them. All of them. They're not written on stone. They're not written on papyrus. Obviously, it's on paper. We got it in front of us. But that's not even the issue. It has to be written here, or really here. That's the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant. It's where the law is written. And why would it be written there? Because my people didn't obey the first time. Or not all of them. The first time. And now we've all been given opportunity to come in and be the first amongst all the nations to come and believe. That is Elohim's word for you for this morning, the bread from heaven. We're going to get into some interesting stuff over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to compare it with all the other stuff that's kind of going on around us. And I know it may seem a little odd, put us at odds with some things, but I don't want to be the guy going out there on Saturday morning looking for manna. I just don't. I don't want to be the guy waking up in the morning and my bread's turned to maggots. I just don't. I'd rather live not by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from his mouth. The trick for us is finding out how we do it in the circumstance that we're in. I find that, honestly, kind of fun, but I'm twisted that way, I guess. Father, we love you. We thank you for this awesome, awesome word, the patterns that are so apparent in it. We pray that you would continue to give us eyes that are open to see them, to understand their meaning, to apply them correctly to who we are. And if we err, Father, we pray that by your Holy Spirit within us and the desire within us to obey your instruction, that you would, as a father to any son, discipline us and guide us in a way that would bring us back in line with your word. That is our desire. We do not want halakha, whether it be Gentile or Jewish. We want your word. We want what Messiah came to share, what your disciples were ordained to give, what Moses began. That's what we want, Father. We thank you for your goodness and your mercy towards us. As on this day, the waving of the first fruits, we do to you that we might be found acceptable in your sight. In the Master's name, all Yah's people say, Amen. Amen. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It's Sunday, so I'm sorry you got to go to work tomorrow. Apologize. But we will be back Wednesday, of course, morning manna. You got to get up every morning and get your manna. And we'll see you on Friday and, of course, on Shabbat. Guys, have a great rest of the day. Shabbat shalom. We can say, everybody, Shabbat. Shalom. Peace.